Major funding for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle-market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, are affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, proudly serving South Carolinians since 1946. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Sequestration, fiscal cliff, 11th hour deadlines, nuclear option, acute partisan position. Seems like we lurch from crisis to urgency and then back again. Is this new reality here to stay? Welcome again to the longest running and most widely watched program on Carolina business and public policy. This time, it's not all about relational politics, but with serious cuts in spending coming one way or another, and more talk about how education and tax reform and economic development are now more important than ever, what is going to give? Our panelists help start this week's dialogue, and later on, freshman Congressman from North Carolina's 9th District, Robert Pittenger.
Major funding also by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, health care, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising health care costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded February 22nd, 2013. On this week's program, Dr. John Connaughton of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, Deepal Eliatamby of Alliance Consulting Engineers, Inc., and special guest, Congressman Robert Pittenger of North Carolina's 9th District. Now, Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Gentlemen, welcome back. John, good to have you here. Deepal, it's been like 1,000 years, but we're glad to have you back here.
Glad to be with you, Chris. It's an exciting time to be in South Carolina, and good to be here with you.
Yes, it is an exciting time. What's the old Chinese proverb? May you live in interesting times, and we are. John, sequestration is, I guess, a fancy term. You know, we only heard about sequestration when you were in a jury, and you kind of had to hole up in a trial, and here it's become kind of part of our lexicon. Sequestration, one way or another, these tax cuts, these spending cuts are coming. Would you agree with that?
I think that's probably true. I think that I heard a commentator the other day say something to the effect that this is a bad program, but its time has come. And we're talking $85 billion this year. It's more like an annualized level of $100 billion in cuts. Probably will occur. Come March 1st, it will probably occur. But even if they decide that they don't like the way the cuts are going to be administered, and they want to change the levels that different areas of the government get cut, I think we're not going to lose that $85 billion this year. That's gone and gone forever. I think there's no way that that's going to change. And so that's going to take a hit in the economy. I mean, there's no question about that. We had $160 billion of tax increases occur on every single American on January 1st with the loss of the Social Security tax holiday. That was $110 billion alone. And this is so 160 and another 85 billion. You know, now we're at $250 billion. That's a significant number in terms of purchasing at the GDP level.
Deepal, talk about transportation for just a second and how it relates to federal government spending or pass-through monies, and especially when it comes to transportation. In the Palmetto State, certainly highway dollars, some highway dollars do come from the feds, but there's this other thing, and your governor, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, clearly came out against any kind of tax increase, gasoline tax increase that would help roads. How is this going to square when transportation is clearly one of the big priorities in the State House?
Chris, transportation is a big priority for everyone in South Carolina. When it comes down to jobs, as our companies look to invest here and expand here, how do they get their employees to and from work? How do they get their raw materials to their facility? How do they get their finished products to their customers or to the Port of Charleston? And Governor Haley has come opposed to it, but she recognizes the importance of economic development in our state, and she's been one of our finest governors who's been advocating for it. Funding mechanism that we have in South Carolina is the gasoline tax. We have the 4th largest highway network in the country, over 42,000 miles of roadway, but we also have the 4th smallest gasoline tax in the country. And those two things don't add up. At some point, I can tell you, gasoline tax is going to impact me. I drive for a living, essentially, and it's going to hit my wallet. But we have to look at the amount of lost hours of productivity and come to a holistic standpoint, look at how do we fund our roads. It's so important. So raising the gasoline tax or coming up with some other alternative has to be discussed. And the General Assembly is having a big debate about that as we speak right now.
So besides Nikki Haley having a bully pulpit and you all in transportation or some type of transportation structure, where's the common ground and how can you get to the point where you can raise that money?
One of the things is we want to make sure that every penny out of the 16.8 cents a gallon that is generated from it goes towards maintaining and building roads. Yeah. Right now there's a few dollars that goes elsewhere. We want to make sure that they're put for road work as well. The other way is to make sure there's some sort of a user fee so that those who use our roads will pay. And indications are that, and this impacts everybody. Yeah. This impacts the farmer that's trying to take his produce to market. This impacts people trying to go to work and people trying to go to school. So we've got to do something or we're going to not be able to drive on our roads in the future.
John, let's switch to something related when it comes to sequestration or a drop in federal spending, and DOD is squarely in the bullseye of that, Department of Defense. And when we talk about DOD, we cannot not talk about the Carolinas, Fort Bragg, Fort Jackson, Pope, Seymour Johnson, the Charleston ports. The Savannah River site, throw it in there. This is, tell me, I'm not overplaying. This is billions of dollars of impact just in these two states.
Of the $85 billion that sequestration is going to cut spending in the U.S. government, half of that's supposed to come from defense. And a good chunk of that is going to have to come from payroll, so that's a big issue. And what apparently the DOD has decided to do, and they announced this about a week or so ago, what they've decided to do is to take most of that cut out of the payroll cut that they have to take out of civilian employees. And their plan right now is starting in April, they're going to furlough 1 day a week for 20 weeks, 22 weeks, I think, civilian employees, 800,000 civilian employees. And there'll be a lot of those here in the Carolinas because of the tremendous presence. It's particularly in the eastern part of both states where this will be felt. I think the real issue for regional economies are going to be around Fort Bragg in the Fayetteville area because that's the largest base, period, in the Carolinas, and it is really where there's a lot of civilian employees for full-time operations of various arms of the Army and the Air Force coming out of Fort Bragg and Pope Air Force Base.
Yeah, but this has to have some
there's no question
reverberation on the state's general budget, doesn't it?
It will. When those
will
folks,
it be meaningful?
Yes, it will be meaningful. We have to understand that we've already started to see, as a result of the tax increases that we saw in January, we're already starting to see firms make adjustments because of decreased demand that they've already witnessing just to this point. For most folks, they didn't realize how severe this was going to be until they got their first paycheck in January. You can talk about it all you want in the fall of 2012, but that first paycheck that doesn't have that money in it,
right,
it has an impact. And so we're starting to see a lot of recreational companies. We're starting to see department stores, restaurants, et cetera, all starting to scale back their operations, realizing that demand has been reduced considerably, and we're going to see that again when the sequestration takes effect, particularly as it relates to Department of Defense and civilian employee paychecks. They're going to take a 20% hit, okay? 20% hit for the next 5 months.
So
it's going to be tough on those families.
Very tough. And as your point is that is meaningful. Deepal, in about 30 seconds, how does this kind of boil over? What's the halo effect around what you're trying to do in transportation. Forget about the gas tax for just a second, but if this spending, DOD or not, is not coming or it will be at least withheld, how do you plan for that?
I'm not sure, but it's going to have a huge impact. As you mentioned, some of the largest facilities like the military's Fort Jackson, Parris Island, which is the only place on the East Coast that trains Marines, Marine Corps Air Station in Beaufort, McIntyre Air National Guard, Shaw Air Force Base that's been involved in the latest rounds of air fights we had. All of those facilities are going to have base cuts, and that's something that'll have an impact on our economy, and we've got to make sure that we have those folks out in good play.
And I guess the follow-up question, which we won't have time to go into, is are they going to be short-term effects or long-term
There are
effects?
other things going on in the economy that point to the second half of the year being better than the first half. The first half of the year will probably suffer from these tax increases and spending cuts, but this is probably it in terms of tax increases and spending cuts. Second half of the year, there are things going on in the economy, particularly in the housing market, that suggest that the second half of the year may be able to overcome the negative of the first part.
I hope this is going to be it as far as tax. I hope you're right.
I think it is.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I hope you're right. Our guest will be on in just a second. Next week on this program, Dr. Scott Rawls has been here before. He is the chief at the North Carolina Community College System. And then in 2 weeks, Dr. Nito Quabain from High Point University. This is obviously up in the Triad. He will be joining us again as well. With the recent molecular, and I wrote this, believe it or not, with the recent molecular change in the Tar Heel State's political leadership, getting into the minds of Republicans would be important to do, or certainly would give you an advantage. Someone who has a history of almost 3 terms in the North Carolina Senate and now represents its citizens on the national stage might have some inside knowledge and therefore an idea of where we may be headed. He is the Congressman from North Carolina's 9th District, the Honorable Robert Pittenger. Mr. Congressman, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Chris. Always great to be with you.
Thank you. And it's good to have you here. By the way, congratulations on the job.
Thank you.
I'm assuming you will be excited about it in a couple of years. Time will tell.
I'm excited about it now.
Let's talk about going from state-level politics to national-level politics and right into the fray when it comes to partisanship and some of the acrimony that we've all seen. What is it like for you? How do you see it? And are you doing anything about it?
Sure. Great question. When I was in the state Senate, we were in the minority. Pretty difficult to run through the barrier of the leadership. You had to really make your way and work hard at it. And really, I determined, my wife and I both, when we went to Washington, we were going to make friends. Not just with my side of the aisle, but with both sides. And we've been to about a half a dozen different conferences with the leadership of both parties and the freshman side. And we pursued that. And that's really been important. And what's evolved out of that, frankly, we had a press conference on Thursday. And we were able to go and send a letter to the president and the leadership outlining our concerns for where the country was headed in a joint statement. And this wouldn't have happened except we really felt the need to build these kind of relationships.
So you made a reference to your past time in the North Carolina Senate when the Republicans were in the minority. So is it the party in power's responsibility to reach across the aisle, or is it a doubling of efforts to those in the majority to try to make it work? How does this work? Where does it start?
Well, the smart person is going to reach, no matter what side they're on. Somebody asked John Stennis years ago, what's been the biggest change? He was from Mississippi, a U.S. Senator from there. What's been the biggest change you've seen in Washington? He said, the jet airplane. Everybody flew home. They weren't there in Washington to build those relationships and work together. And so we just feel like it's important. You don't have to abandon your convictions to go and to build relationships with somebody and work in a reasonable way to try to find solutions.
Mm-hmm. John?
So, Congressman,
yes,
you were known as a fiscal conservative when you were in the NC Senate.
I still am today.
You still are today, I'm sure of that. So what committees are you going to be on and that will relate to that concern of yours, and what do you expect to try to accomplish in your first term?
Sure. Well, I'm on financial services. I worked hard to get on that. I felt it was important for our region, obviously. I've counted about 2,800 businesses that really fall under that umbrella just in our region. Under financial services, the subcommittees I'm on are financial institutions and international and domestic monetary policy. So I'm really excited about that. Chairman Henschling is a very effective leader, and we've got a great team on there. Mel Watt is also on the same committee. Patrick McHenry is as well. And we've reached out to all of them. I know Patrick well, but I've reached out to Mel. I've invited Mel even. He came and spoke to all my friends who came up for my swearing in. So that's important. We have to maintain a real fiscal discipline in our government. We don't have it today. When we were at Williamsburg, we had a speaker, Peter Orszag. He was a budget writer for Mr. Obama. And he laid out his concerns for where the country was headed. And he said, if we don't address the debt, we're playing games. And if we don't address entitlements, we're playing games with the debt. And he said that 3 times. I thought, gosh, that's refreshing. Because here's a man who really understands where we're headed and why we could end up very much like Greece and really collapse. And that's really where I'm at. I had a general that came in my office and just on Thursday, and he said, Mr. Congressman, I've got to look you in the eye and tell you that if we go into sequester, we're going to lose men and women on the field. And, that gripped me. I just had a young man that went with me to the State of the Union. My wife gave up her seat so he could go. He'd been going through treatment at Walter Reed, just a wonderful kid named Billy Armstrong. And Billy came and he joined us and spent the whole evening with him, just a special kid. And I thought about all the Billy Armstrongs, and it just really gripped my heart. Mm-hmm. But I had to say to the general, I said, General, I feel like where we are financially and fiscally in this country is as great a risk as where we are with Iran or North Korea. And if we don't address it, where are we headed? What financial capacity we're going to have to fund the military then?
And how did he respond to that?
He said, sir, I understand. These are very, very, very difficult times.
And tough decisions.
Yes.
Deepal.
Congressman, I would also like to add my congratulations to you for being elected to represent the citizens of the 9th Congressional District and North Carolina as a whole.
Sure.
Right before you were elected, the federal transportation bill was reauthorized that expires now in 2014, which in congressional terms is a very short time.
Sure.
We operated under continuing resolutions for several years. Are we going to see that more, or do you think there's any chance that the transportation bill will reauthorize in 2014 for a longer time period? And where are we going to find, I'm going to ask Chris's question from a federal standpoint, where are we going to find the funding to bridge the gap for all of our transportation needs?
Sure, that's a very good question. It's a priority and needs to be. There will be a continuing resolution that is passed sooner rather than later. I believe you're going to see that. And then we need to deal with how we're going to resolve the spending issues that we have. And it needs to be done with a scalpel and not with a hatchet. We've offered to the President the ability to address the spending levels that need to be done and give him discretion. So we've tried to be as thoughtful as we can to look at the concerns that we have to make sure that we're spending the dollars in the most prudent fashion.
Quick question to follow up on that. You mentioned hatchet versus scalpel in terms of the sequestration spending cuts. Right now, as I understand it, folks in the different agencies can't move money from one bucket to another bucket. Everything is the same percentage. Is there any chance that this $85 billion will be more thoughtfully trimmed?
That's what we're giving the President the opportunity to do.
But what do you think is the chance that's going to...
That he'll do it?
Yeah.
If he doesn't do it, it's political grandstanding. Why shouldn't he do it?
Well, he says that about the Republicans, though.
Well, the spending cuts are there. They came out of his office. He's the one who originated the idea of a sequester. And what we're saying to you is, Mr. President, here's sequester, here are the spending levels that we've agreed to, and we're going to defer to you and allow you the right as Commander-in-Chief to determine where those spending levels ought to be, where those cuts ought to be. That's a lot of difference.
5 years later, after the rout, at least the capital market rout in 2008 and the corresponding 2009 volatility, we saw and we heard many ugly things about many government agencies, many insurance companies, and we got through some pretty tough times and a lot of finger pointing at Fannie Mae, whether that's still working itself out mostly. But the Federal Housing Authority, here is an agency that's pretty big, and you've made it kind of a priority for you. Tell us why.
Well, you've got about 59% of the home insurance backing that comes out of FHA just absolutely overlaps what the private industry has done, maybe 19% from the private market. So, they've displaced it. You can go, FHA requires about 3.5% down payment, easy credit. I mean, that's part of the debacle where we are today. There's a $16 billion deficit with the FHA today that the taxpayers are going to have to ante up for. This shouldn't happen. And we're working on the Financial Services Committee. We've had hearings the last 2 weeks. We're trying to get to the bottom of it and find how they can run their operation in a more fiscally sound way.
Is it solvent? Is FHA solvent?
No, it's not solvent, not at all. Not with a $16.3 billion deficit.
Is it the next shoe to drop, you think?
I think it's dropped. I mean, I think it's there. That's reality. The numbers are there, and you can't deny them.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of financial services, you're familiar with Dodd-Frank that was passed a couple of Congresses ago. And I talk to bankers on a regular basis, and they suggest to me that less than 1/3 of the Dodd-Frank rules are fully written.
Correct.
And the question becomes, that's after 2 years with the legislation being in place, can the financial service industries and can the economy expect to, is there any way to speed this process up so people know what the rules are and we can move on? I mean, I think that's delaying a lot of activity.
Yeah, it's so complex. I'm reading and rereading. I've got a manual that thick about it. And I told Chairman Henschling, the chairman of the committee, I said, Chairman, I want you to know I memorized the manual. He said, you did? I said, no, but I did call 5 lawyers. I mean, it's just so very complex. Ben Bernanke was asked about, have there been any real assessment and cost analysis of Dodd-Frank. He said, heavens no, nobody understands it. It's having a huge impact.
Is there any movement afoot to streamline this? Or
on our side, there is. We're hoping that with Barney Frank absent, that there would be some willingness on the part of other members on the other side to say, hey, what are some ways that we can modify it? I've met with community bankers. I mean, they have really been put under tremendous stress in this, and that we're seeing a folding of community banks. There sure hadn't been any new ones that have started. So we have got to find ways to modify it. I want to work in a bipartisan way. I've got a respectful relationship with Mel Watt and others on the committee, and I think the chairman is moving that direction as well. But if we don't, we're just going to continue to aggravate the entire process.
We have about 2 minutes.
Congressman, I want to ask you about a subject that's real close to my heart, that is economic development, which is creating jobs and increasing the per capita income of folks around the South. I look back 20 years ago and you look at the top 100 in economic development announcements, at least 10 of those were chicken processing facilities. But today, we're making airplanes in Charleston, South Carolina, and Mobile, Alabama, and Gulfstream has in Savannah, Georgia, and of course, Spirit Aviation Aerosystems in Kingston, and Honda Jets in Greensboro. We're making some of the most advanced luxury automobiles in Greer, South Carolina with BMW, and Mercedes in Vance, Alabama, and Volkswagen in Chattanooga. What are we doing as far as the federal government is concerned in trying to promote manufacturing in the country, and what can we do in the South to make sure that we get our share?
Everything we've done has had an adverse effect, in my opinion. We've kept the tax rates high. We've kept the regulations just totally cumbersome. The corporate rate, of course, is 35% here, highest in the entire world. We seem to be going the wrong direction. I'm a free market guy, and we need to get out of the way. And you've done a good job of that in South Carolina. They're on the way to doing a good job of that in North Carolina. I remember in the Senate, I was always envious of how you had such strong economic development. We would lose a lot of companies to your state, as we did to Tennessee and other states, because we had the highest corporate and marginal rates of any state in the Southeast. So hopefully, cooler minds will prevail. I think, frankly, the trajectory that we're on right now in terms of our economy and the central planning that's taken place from Washington, it's a failed system. And that's just going to see further demise and decline. and hopefully at some point we can go pick it up.
Mr. Pittenger, thank you for being on the program, and especially thank you for agreeing within the last 12 hours. We appreciate that.
Oh, Chris, it's always an honor to be with you anytime.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Good to see you all.
Deepal, thanks for making the trip as always. John, what can I say?
Hope and pray for the second half of 2013.
Thank you. Good night. You heard it.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, are affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, proudly serving South Carolinians since 1946. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.